Related. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. Today we need to sit down and have a very serious conversation about what is really happening in West Africa, specifically inside Mali and across the entire Sahel region. For a very long time, many of us who follow the events in our region have been asking the exact same questions over and over again. How is it possible that these armed groups in the desert continue to fight month after month, year after year? Where are they getting the money to buy brand new vehicles, heavy equipment, satellite communications, and endless supplies of fuel? How can small groups in the desert match or even outgun national armies? Well, recently, some very important information came out in the international news that gives us a clear look into the inner workings of this crisis. A major report was published by Reuters based on an official document from a United Nations monitoring team that tracks global extremist group. Now, let me say this right from the very start. We always look at reports from the United Nations and Western media with a lot of care and a lot of questioning. We do not just accept everything they write at face value because we know that international media always has its own interests and its own ways of framing African stories. However, even with those reservations, the specific facts brought forward in this new report are simple too important for us to ignore. They reveal a financial reality that every single African needs to understand. According to this official UN report, a massive ransom payment of approximately 50 million US dollars was made in Mali late last year in 2025. This huge sum of money was paid to secure the release of foreign hostages held by an armed coalition operating across the Sahel. To really understand why this number is so shocking, you have to look at how ransom economies usually work in our region. Security experts who monitor security in West Africa will tell you that a typical ransom for foreign hostage in the Sahel usually ranges between 4 million and $6 million. That is already a huge amount of money in our part of the world. But this single payment was $15 million. That is nearly 10 times the normal rate. In one single transaction, this armed group collected an amount of money that would normally take them years of kidnappings and negotiations to accumulate. Now, who actually paid this money? This is where the story gets very interesting, and this is where you have to pay close attention to how the information is being reported. The official United Nations report itself mentioned the $50 million payment, but the UN team went completely silent on who made the payment. They did not name the country and they did not identify the specific hostages. It was Reuters that went further, citing their own regional sources. According to those sources, the country that paid this massive sum was the United Arab Emirates. The report indicates that an Emirati citizen, along with two other foreign nationals from Pakistan and Iran, were released after this money changed hands. When foreign journalists asked officials from the United Arab Emirates about this specific payment, the officials did not confirm the transaction, but they also did not deny it. They simply gave a standard diplomatic statement saying that their country stands firmly against extremism and its financing. Regardless of the diplomatic language, we have to look at the reality of what this money did once it entered the region. And this is the part of the UN report that should make every single African pause and think. The UN investigators explicitly stated in their document that the vast majority of that $50 million was immediately distributed among different fighting units across the Sahel, reaching groups in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, and even down toward neighboring coastal states like Benin and Togo. The report went on to say in plain words that these specific funds played a central role in financing the major military offensive that has been hitting Mali since April of this year. Think about what $50 million actually means when it lands in the hands of an armed group in the Sahel. In our region, $50 million is not just numbers on paper. It buys real physical power on the ground. First, it buys mobility. It buys hundreds of brand new pickup trucks and heavy-duty motorcycles, which are the main tools these groups use to move fast through the rough terrain of the desert. Second, it buys fuel. In a war zone, fuel is expensive, rare, and heavily controlled. When you have tens of millions of dollars, you can buy all the fuel you need on the black market, allowing your fighters to travel hundreds of kilometers to launch surprise attacks. Third, it buys advanced technology. It pays for high-end satellite communication gear, night vision equipment, military uniforms, and even commercial surveillance drones to track army movements. Fourth, it buys intelligence. Money allows these groups to pay local informants inside towns and villages and even bribe weak individuals within security networks to give them early warnings about military movements. And fifth, perhaps most dangerous of all, $50 million allows an armed group to pay regular monthly salaries to its fighters. We have to be honest about the social conditions in many parts of the Sahel. In rural areas where young men have no job, no formal education, no government support, and no financial future, an armed group sitting on $50 million suddenly becomes the biggest financial employer in the entire district. They can offer a young man a regular monthly wage that he could never earn anywhere else. That is how these groups manage to grow so fast. Official estimates now says that these coalitions command between 7,000 and 8,000 active fighters across the region. To put that into proper perspective, there are several sovereign nations in Africa whose entire national army do not even have 8,000 active soldiers. Yet here we have a non-state group recruiting, equipping, and paying an army of 8,000 men right in the middle of West Africa. And if you look at the timeline on the ground, the connection between the money and the violence becomes very clear. Late last year, the money changed hands. Then by April of this year, Mali experienced one of the most intense, highly coordinated waves of attacks since the current crisis began over a decade ago. We saw coordinated strikes against major towns like Gati, near the capital city of Bamako. We saw tragic targeted attacks on high-level military leadership, including the car bomb attack that unalived Mali's defense minister, General Sadio Kamara, right at his home. We saw attempts to blockade trade routes, bringing food and fuel into the capital. And by July, we saw multi-day battles in northern towns like Gao, Aglehawk, and Anafis, where the attackers deployed armored vehicles, heavy artillery, and drones. Armored vehicles, artillery, and drones are not tools used by small, disorganized bands of local rebels. Those are the weapons of a heavy, well-funded military force. The audacity grew so much that by June, these groups were publicly offering rewards worth millions of euros for information on the whereabouts of top government officials. You cannot offer millions in bounties unless you are sitting on millions in cash. Now, let us step back and ask the moral and political question that every African must ask. What does this mean for African sovereignty? When a foreign government decides to pay a massive fortune to free its own citizens, they may view it as simple as act of saving a human life. From a purely human perspective, any government wants to bring its citizens back home safely. But when that payment amounts to $50 million and that money goes straight into the hands of groups that are actively trying to tear an African nation apart, the real world consequences is devastating. The safety of a few foreign nationals is bought at the direct expense of life, security, and stability of millions of African citizens who have to live with the resulting violence every single day. This brings us directly to the second major problem facing our region. Where do the recruits come from? How do we stop the recruitment pipeline? Because as we know, money alone cannot fight a war. Money buys the weapons, the fuel, and the trucks. But you still need human beings to drive those trucks and pull those triggers. Money is the fuel of the war machine, but radicalization is the engine that keeps delivering new fighters to spend that money. This is what our leaders always say, pointing fingers at foreign partners and foreign sponsors. But the world keep making it look as if they have been lying to them. It's just because they cannot fight them. Now, what they have been saying, their own people have vindicated our leaders in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. That is why Africans, we are calling for unity. It's only in our unity that we can set ourselves free. What has been revealed is deeper, and the time for us to unite is now to set ourselves free rather than allowing ourselves to be used against our own selves. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, hit the notification button and select all. Share, like, and comment. We are the only ones that can set ourselves free. United we stand, divided we fall, and united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's colonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we make Africa great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world in Africa, West Africa, and in Mali.